Hi, this is Phil. What I'd like to do is take a few moments just to reflect with you on what it was these false teachers in Crete were actually teaching. Now, in chapter 1, verse 10, we already noted that Paul speaks about rebellious people, idle talkers, deceivers, especially those of the circumcision. And in the previous teaching, I've talked to you about the circumcision party and how they were proclaiming that for Gentiles to be truly saved, to benefit from the gospel, they have to become Jews first and embrace Judaism, circumcision, and the food laws and other laws. And when they were Jewish proselytes, then they were in a place to be saved. And it would seem that this is confirmed, that at least this was one of the major elements of the false teaching. It's interesting how it may not be the only one, because Paul says in verse 10, especially those of the circumcision. In other words, there may be others as well. Notice how he says, after talking about the negative characteristics of Cretans, in verse 13, they should become sound in faith, not paying attention to Jewish myths or to commandments of those who reject the truth. So this would confirm that there's Jewish elements in the teaching. Jewish myths may refer to the false teaching of the circumcision group, or it may be more than that. There may be a mixture of the legalism of the circumcision party mixed with mystical teaching. It seems when we get to Timothy, 1st and 2nd Timothy, this is actually what was happening. And you can explore that when you get there. In verse 15, where you read, "To the pure all things are pure, but to the corrupt and unbelieving nothing is pure." And this probably is a reference to the Jewish food laws, or maybe the Jewish purification laws, but probably to the kosher food laws. And the false teachers were promoting the continuing observance of these Jewish food laws. And Paul is saying to the Gentiles that they did not need to observe these, because all foods are clean, even as we read the comment in Mark 7, where there's a discussion about purification and purification rites, that the food laws are no longer relevant for the new covenant believer. Beyond that, we come to chapter 3, verse 9, and you'll notice how Paul says that Titus should avoid stupid controversies, genealogies, dissensions, and quarrels about the law. So again, it seems that the law and the misuse of the law was a major issue in the false teaching. And 1 Timothy in chapter 1, we find the same thing. When Paul says to Timothy that the reason I left you in Ephesus was that you would stop certain persons teaching, false teaching. And as you read that chapter through, Paul says how they don't understand the law and the nature of the law. Verse 8, 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 8, "For we know that the law is good if one uses it legitimately." And it seems that the teachers were failing to do that. Also genealogies, we're not sure. Maybe it was some convoluted teaching from the Old Testament genealogies that was trying to prove some point. Maybe some have thought it has to do with the hierarchy of spiritual beings, which would make the false teaching here have a strong Jewish flavour but also mixed in with the mystery religions and with Gnostic tendencies. We're really not sure how that works. But this is all we can know. It's very difficult for us to be able to put together a systematic teaching of the false teachers. But what we can see in Titus, even if we can't know exactly what they were teaching, we do have an idea. And that is, the false teachers were saying it is important to observe the law and to embrace Jewish legalism. And we can also see how this was affecting the church negatively. How even though the false teachers seemed to be teaching some sort of legalism, some sort of emphasis on people obeying rules and regulations to please God, it seems that this teaching was not producing life in the Christians. And it certainly wasn't producing character, because the truth was not in accordance with godliness. Notice how in chapter 1 verse 1 Paul begins how he is a servant of God, an apostle of Jesus Christ, for the sake of the faith of God's elect and to the knowledge of the truth that is in accordance with godliness. Right from the beginning, Paul emphasizes that the truth of the gospel is in keeping with a godly lifestyle. And you would have noticed how throughout Titus there's a break between what they believed and the way they lived. And Paul was wanting to reconnect that. And you've noticed how there's an emphasis on this. So whole families were being upset. And they were, the Gentiles were being encouraged to obey the Jewish food laws, it would seem. And probably the area of circumcision too. But as you read the letter, you would have noticed how the breakdown of right doctrine was resulting in ungodliness in their lifestyle. And so when Paul is exhorting Titus, he exhorts him to teach them how to live right. And then you get that major verse, chapter 2, verse 11. For the grace of God, as compared with the teaching of the circumcision party, they were teaching law. Paul is emphasizing the gospel of grace. It is the gospel of grace that is not just saving grace, but it's enabling grace. It's the enabling grace of the gospel that has appeared to bring salvation. Not only does it bring salvation to all, but it is a training grace, enabling us to renounce impiety and worldly passion in this present age and live lives that are self-controlled, upright and godly. So we can get a bit of the flavour of the false teachers and what they were teaching. And we can certainly see the consequences of that false teaching. It was having a devastating effect on the lives of the believers in Crete and on their testimony to the wider world. Titus had a great challenge and a really important commission from Paul for the church there in Crete.